Linux OTC. Welcome, everybody. I'm Bill,
I'm Leo.
And I'm Norbert.
episode one, guys. Um, yeah, this is our new show. We're really proud of it, I guess.
We're not proud of it yet.
We're
We haven't done anything yet.
yeah, I'm trying to stay positive, man.
I might be proud of it. We'll see. We'll
it
see
was
how this goes.
it felt like a long time coming. It takes a little time to get up and running, get all the stuff set up. But anyway,
I blame
um,
time zones.
time zones are a big issue with these things. But
Oh,
I
I,
mean,
I can I can talk about that.
consider. I mean, I don't know how old you are, Leo, but
Old.
I consider 20 years ago this would not have been possible. It would have been hard enough
Nope.
for just Leo and I to be able to connect and do something like this, let alone connect with people on the other side of the planet in real time with video in high
Yep.
definition, and then make a show as though we're all sitting in the same room. The magic of that is not lost on me one bit.
20
So,
years ago, I was just getting a hold of 1 megabit per second
oh,
cable modems.
oh
And oh man, for coming from 56K, are you kidding? That was
yeah,
that
no,
was
no
just
doubt.
amazing. But I look up in the corner of this little thing, and I'm transferring at 3 megabits per second or so. So definitely not possible, at least in this quality.
No, not even
What's
close.
interesting is a lot of this was mainly due to better hardware and better infrastructure, not necessarily better software. Because a good example I recently heard or read about is AI. There have been a lot of uh, breakthroughs in AI, which aren't necessarily breakthroughs because it's not that AI software is a lot more sophisticated than a few years ago. It's just we have a lot faster computing,
Yeah. I
infrastructure.
can see that.
Yeah,
And we have companies that over the last 20, 30 years or whatever have been vacuuming up every single little thing that we do on the internet and then feeding that into the AI and then training the AI on our content. So, a few things had to happen for Chat GPT to come in and have a full conversation with you and write the script for this show, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, it can do that. I asked it. I asked it the other day. What can I do to make my podcast more popular? And it read it. Well, for starters,
did you?
yes, I did. It gave me a whole bunch of things that, no doubt. I mean, they're just machine learning models, but it gave me a list of things and wished me luck.
Good
And that's,
luck.
I mean, that's the obvious next step in the progression of all this stuff.
Well, I feel like if we wanted to be popular in the long run, we'd been doing a podcast about Kim Kardashian. So here
Yeah,
we
we
are.
Well, you see,
episode one, 7,000 uploads and downloads. Yeah.
for that to work, we would actually have to follow what's happening with the
Yeah,
Kardashians, and I'm
I
not
don't even
sure.
do that in Linux.
Don't think
Yeah,
I've ever done
yeah.
that.
But the thing about I just want to get a little back to the hardware improving, because it leads to the argument that, well, if hardware is getting better and better, then it's less and less important to optimize software.
Mm.
Oftentimes when ex- I mean, this often comes up when people criticize GNOME for being quote unquote bloated. Well, I wouldn't say it is
Bloated with
because,
what?
yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it is bloated because if you
Yeah.
just install GNOME itself, just the GNOME shell on a minimal installation, it will usually run about 600 megabytes of RAM, which is perfectly fine nowadays. I would say it's even on par with something like Mint or something running KDE.
I think a desktop environment's RAM usage is totally irrelevant. Simply because the moment you open up your desktop, you open up a browser, and that's
Which
another
is using
600
twice as
megabytes of
much.
RAM.
Yeah.
And then you go to a website that has JavaScript on it, and now you're at 2 gigs. God forbid you go to some site like Twitter or Facebook or something else that has JavaScript that has the endless scroll over and over and over, pulling in more and more stuff. So
Those
I'm
kind
now
of
worried
sites that are a
about it.
nightmare to get on with your phone.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah,
I
yeah.
recently finally got myself to Blur HTML and CSS, and I started building my website. It's not in English, so I don't. It's basically all Hungarian, so
Oh, you
I
just use Google
don't.
Translate with it, so it's cool. You gotta drop the thing, drop the URL.
Well, it's mostly for my social links, all of which are, well, 90% of which is Hungarian. But the thing is, I realized how much you can do with CSS, like little flat color style boxes and buttons that you can do the corners, rounded corners, and everything. Basically, first I did little buttons and exported them to SVG, and then my friend was like, "Wait, you can actually do this with CSS," and then he quickly created little CSS buttons for me, which
Hmm.
looked almost identical. So it's interesting.
Yep.
I
And
mean,
it's better to
unless
do it.
unless
It's better to do it that way than to bring in a bunch of JavaScript. Uh, I
yeah,
think.
but when it's an interactive website with a lot of media, I mean, I assume JavaScript is something that you cannot avoid nowadays.
Mm. The letter less better. Less is better. I don't know how to say that.
The
But
least,
yeah,
the better. Or
something like that.
yeah, got to add words to it.
Yeah.
Quick little bit of admin before we really get into this. Email the show linuxotc at proton.me, and our web address is linuxotc.org. Now, I've got links on that site to many of the places where you can consume the show, including the RSS feed, um, and the as we create social media, the links for that'll be on here as well. So far, all I've got's a link to the email and then Discord channel. Go join the Discord channel. That's probably, I don't know, probably where a lot of our energy will be. I don't know, maybe Mastodon and Matrix at some point. I just got on Mastodon a couple weeks ago. I kind of like it.
You
I got a
kind of like it
Mastodon
or you don't
maybe.
like it.
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also just got a Mastodon maybe 2 months ago. I mean, around the time it gained a lot of traction. I tried it before, but there wasn't a lot of people I would follow. But now there are. But I also realized that in order to actually keep up with my feed, it needs time investment. But then I also tried Twitter because somehow I never got around using the Twitter account that I registered around 10 years ago. It will be 10 years ago in a few weeks, actually, I think. And then I realized, oh, wait, now I have two separate platforms. Uh, that's a lot more time to go through each day. So I just kind of don't look at either of them properly. So I'm just back to not using either. So I just tend to stick to YouTube, and I just curate my watch later list. So whenever sometimes I just go to YouTube and look at my recommended. I put videos into watch later. Look at my feed, in my inbox feed. Put videos into watch later. So when I want to watch videos, I don't have to spend time looking for something to watch. I just go to my watch later and I pick something from there.
You know, it's
And
interesting.
what's in your watch later is Linux OTC, right?
It will be.
Well, not
Obviously.
yet because we haven't uploaded yet.
Well,
It's
by the time
interesting.
somebody sees this, we will have uploaded.
Yeah.
Can you imagine
So I will
somebody
have
going
had
back and
it.
binge watching this and starting with this episode, obviously, and it's like 7 years from now, and they're watching us right now. I just
Oh,
threw 7 years ago. 7 years, I just threw that out of the middle of my head. But yeah, it's cool.
seven's
Yeah,
a
to the
nice solid
listener
number.
who's listening to this in 2030, I hope NVIDIA support is decent by now.
I hope by now we can just install something and it works.
It won't
Yeah.
be. Not
No,
Nvidia.
but talking about the social media thing, though, I think it's interesting. The younger generations almost seem to be getting away from social media, or at least that's been my experience.
Different
With
social
some,
media. They're on TikTok now.
yeah,
Well, not
I
for
mean,
long. When the U.S. federal government bans it,
oh, crying out loud.
it may not be, but they'll move to something else. But I think that's the thing about the newer generation is that they don't have any love for any particular platform. They will
No,
move whenever they want. between and both or all of them or whatever they feel like, whatever their friends are using is quite literally the only thing that is tying them to a service. And when you push them, they'll move to something else because what does it matter?
And I've noticed it's
Yeah,
kind of a regional thing too, because you go to a lot of places here in the Midwest, even the younger people still have a Facebook, and many of the people around this part of the country, I don't know if this is unique to the United States or not, but people around here don't even have a Twitter. It's just non-existent. And
how I assumed it was a lot more popular there than here because in Hungary, basically the most I think Facebook Messenger is still the most widespread way of instant messaging.
The
And
WhatsApp or the
basic
Facebook Messenger?
Facebook
no,
Messenger,
Facebook Messenger.
I
Oh,
know people that is their primary, if not the only, source of communication. Is
and it's
Yeah,
younger
that's pretty
folks.
yeah.
well. I know that my brother, who's a couple of years younger than me, well, I like to think that I'm still young. I'm 26,
You're
so
Yeah.
not young. You're
yeah,
old now.
yeah, yeah. Well, basically, around 26 is where the rate at which your cells die. No, the rate at which your yeah, the rate at which your cells are created, are reproducing. It gets uh
It peaks and start to
all
go
right.
down.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
was gonna say we got dark. We got dark. So you're
yeah.
telling me I'm slowly
Okay,
dying?
I
Thanks.
I might try to edit this segment so that I don't go
No, you're
like
fine.
Oh,
okay.
so you're
So I
editing the
because
show?
yeah, I
No, you're
try to
not.
I try I well I may be. I try to avoid these noises because I don't like them. But then if you just go silent, that's also awkward. Yeah,
It's not.
basically
It's not. The silence is not awkward. Don't do that. It's. I mean, don't
okay.
think that about the silence. Silence is normal. As a matter of
Yeah.
fact,
Yes, but
ums are normal, and ands
yeah.
and all that other stuff. It's normal.
But
Yeah.
when you're on a podcast recording and you just go silent, the other people have the incentive to say something.
No, you got to go silent and not move. That way they think
You.
Yeah,
they think you froze up.
yeah. So what I'm trying to say is around the age of 26, the rate of your cells dying starts to be higher than the rate at which they are created. So technically, you can say that that's when you start aging.
Hmm.
So
Soon
I
enough.
Yeah.
I saw the rat trials, man. The rats are
okay.
getting younger, and I need one of those pills. So I can
Mm.
just I'll keep this. This is fine. I'll just stay here. Or if there's a vampire out there, I mean, hey man, right now, good time. Let's go.
Well, if you can do some research and find a way to elongate the telomeres of your chromosomes, basically the end of your chromosome starts
Hmm.
becoming shorter, and there's some extra useless DNA at the end, so that gets worn off and not the useful DNA. But when that's gone, then the chromosome itself is affected. But to jump from tangent to tangent to tangent and back to the original tangent, so yeah, I'm 26 and I like to think I'm young, and my brother is 22, now 23, and I try to get them, I try to get him and my family, my parents to use Signal, but not with much success. So yeah, even among younger people, Facebook Messenger is still kind of popular. Basically, Discord and Facebook Messenger is what the vast majority of people use. I mean, Discord for young people, but for older people, it's pretty much Facebook Messenger.
Yeah.
For older people, it's
Here's
still
a
SMS.
um here's an example of the entropy you were talking about. Here's me at your age,
Oh,
right?
look at this.
Oh God. Okay, that's enough.
They need to fix that with the rat thing like now.
Yeah.
And I was reading that like they can roll back time as far as how old you are, right? Like to undo the damage you're talking about to the ends of the telomeres or whatever whatever. But they can also roll them forward. So they got rats to prematurely age and
That's
just look
useful.
20. Well, I guess us would be like 20 years, but them probably just a couple of years older. And they got all gray and everything. So yeah, I mean, hey, hopefully it works in humans, man. I need that. Keep me alive
Well, I don't
forever.
know. Do you think making our lifespan longer would probably affect how humans make decisions? Because
It will definitely expedite us destroying the planet because we'll
yeah,
stop dying and then we'll just keep producing plastic. So you know.
yeah. I wonder sometimes if a lot of the reasons that we do anything right is because we just there's this built-in time limitation, and it affects our sense of causality, or our sense of uh, benefit versus consequence
Yeah.
decision
Well,
making.
we as humans tend to not do things that are the best for all of us. Um, so you know, sometimes,
Yeah.
Yeah.
sometimes.
But if I'm asked what's the meaning of life, I recently concluded that I would just say to try and be happy and content with your life, because that's kind of the upper limit of what you can do as a living thing, because the world, is the world that you perceive. It's sort of filtered through your brain, everything. So if it makes you happy to make other people happy, that's in a roundabout way that can still be seen as selfish, because I mean, selfish in a sense that making other people happy makes you feel happy, and that so
So it negates
your
the existence of altruism altogether, because there's a bit of vanity that goes along with doing the right thing, because we like the way that feels when we do the right thing, and maybe we like the notoriety that goes along with being
So
known for doing the right thing.
so Norbert, what you're saying is the meaning of life is to get as many shots of dopamine in your brain as possible.
Yeah,
well,
dopamine.
I'm not trying to make it that
Oh,
black
I
and
am.
white, and yeah.
Oh, I am.
Yeah, love my dopamine.
Well,
We're gonna
I
take this all the
also
way down to how it makes us all sound terrible.
yeah, I have to
But
I mean,
honest. Yeah.
I kind of been corrupted by my education in biology, so I tend to have that filter
That's
as
what they
well.
claim happens when you go to college, man. That's what they say.
Well, okay. Episode one.
I guess
I
we should
thought.
start the show, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, when you
Well.
said it's going to be an unscripted show, you weren't kidding.
Yeah. Well, off the
Uh,
cuff. I mean, that's in the
this
spirit.
is where it took us.
Yep. And I had absolutely no doubt that, um, in my considerable expertise in putting together the right personalities to make a show like this, I there was no doubt in my mind that we wouldn't have any problem. For anybody that's unaware at this point, the OTC stands for off the cuff, or at least that was my first intention. And then
I
from
thought it
there,
was off the clock.
okay, so there you
Off
go.
the clock,
It was off the clock or over
and
the
then
counter.
over the counter, right?
But like
Yeah,
we were
because we don't
saying,
require a subscription. You can
we
get
don't.
this
If
medicine over the counter.
I don't care what you call it, as long as you're here listening, as long as you're here watching, as long as you're interacting with us, that's all I care about. And of course, use Linux.
Hey, did we even talk about Linux today?
I think I mentioned no, but
That's
and
true.
I
Nvidia.
don't know if
Yeah,
we
but
were.
you can use GNOME on the BSDs, so it's not technically just Linux. Hmm? Hmm?
No,
Hmm.
I had KDE and Plasma installed on top of Windows one time many years ago.
Yep.
That was
Can you do
BSD
that?
interesting.
OTC.
Can you do that?
I did. Couldn't remember. I couldn't tell you how I did it. It was basically just a graphical shell sitting on top of Windows, and it barely worked.
Yes, but I assume the Windows shell was running underneath, because Windows was not designed to run without
No,
a graphical shell.
no, and I don't know how much, what kind of logic they were using behind all of the graphical elements to make that work. If it was just another layer of abstraction on top of the Windows UI that's already there or what, but I know it worked really really crappy. So, but it was kind of a cool proof of concept, I think. And I couldn't tell you for the life of me what version of Plasma that was. It was no later than 4. It might have been KDE 3, but there's quite a few open source projects that I used to use on Windows, and some of them were better than others.
Yeah,
Yeah, for
I
me it
use
was all open source stuff, and then I just swapped Windows for Linux and just continued using the same stuff.
Yeah, well, what I found was oftentimes these projects, and I'll use FileZilla as a big example of a open source project that got ported. I suppose it was ported to Windows by a third party, and it's hosted on SourceForge, I think. But if you go and install it, of course, it's the old .exe file, and the next kind of install, and it's got three different methods of trying to sneak other uh,
Oh,
other
right.
little applications in, like different types of scans, things that run in your tray and all that, and a few other projects are kind of the same way. The method by which you get this software on Windows is just sus, for lack of a better
Speaking of the
word.
younger generation.
Yeah. Um, well, we want them here too. But I was never really impressed with the way you get some of this software. Of course, now that was before we had the software store on Windows and all that. Now it's
Yeah, well, Winget. I get pretty much everything I need from Winget now, and that bypasses pretty much all of that stuff. I've not seen, though. I guess I have not installed a lot of the software that falls in the sus category
eh.
through Winget, but um,
Is
at,
Winget a community maintained thing? So are the packages maintained by volunteers, or or is there a core team that
I think like
oversees
the
everything?
store, you submit your own software to Winget.
So it's not just another front end to the same Windows store
No.
built
No,
into the. Okay.
no, not at all.
Basically,
Hmm.
I think you can package something for Winget by providing a URL for the exe file,
Yeah,
and
it seems to me to be pretty simple like that. I mean, there's likely a manifest and a link, and that's pretty much it.
so
But
Hmm.
sort of like a template, like a build file, except it's not building something. Like when there's an AUR package that is just fetching a deb file and unpacking it and copying the
yeah,
files to their proper places. So I
yeah,
think
I
it's like
kind of
that, except you fetch the exe file and then it runs it for you.
yeah, it feels more like Flatpak or Snap than it does that you are or anything.
So it doesn't need administrative privileges to work, or.
Depending on what you're installing, but typically no, because
Oh.
I think Firefox, if you fetch it that way, installs it under the user account. So,
Hmm.
um, yeah, would let you bypass the UAC. Hmm.
Admittedly, I just run Windows in a KVM for the
Yeah,
very few things that I need it for,
yeah,
and
but just like Flatpak, right? I mean, you
yeah.
can you can use Flatpak and install a lot of that stuff in the user account as opposed to system wide, which
Right.
removes the need to provide a password or elevate in any way.
If you only have a single account in a computer, it makes sense to install for a user because if you don't need the app to have any privileges, system-wide privileges, then you there's no reason for you to install it that way. Uh, I install my Flatpaks to my user directly because I'm the only user. But if you have multiple users on a computer, it would be kind of jank to have to install each program for each separate user.
Well, not just that. Applications like Audacity that needs access to third-party plugins. The new Audacity that's got all that real-time.
Oh yeah, I could never figure that out in Flatpak really.
Yeah, I mean, it needs to be in a certain directory,
Hmm.
and so I went into Flat Seal and I tried to like link it to the directory where it would normally be,
It doesn't like
and
that.
that
It
doesn't work
doesn't like it.
either.
No, because
Um,
Flatpak has specific instructions as to not be able to reach into something. Like Flatpak will not allow itself to do that. So even
Um,
if you give it
im-
permission through something like Flat Seal, it's got some hard nose on where it will and will not go.
that's interesting. There's got to be a way around that other
Well,
than
the
just
way around it is install it in the user account and then look within var in your user to make those changes.
yeah.
that's
But
odd.
you're
I haven't had a lot of good experiences with the native package of Audacity in terms of audio input output. The only time Audacity works well for me is if I have it as a Flatpak. but I never had to go into Flatsil and give it permissions to directories. So, what scenario are you talking about? What sort
Well,
of?
there's a new feature in the 3.2 releases where it's got these real-time effects that you can apply.
VSTs. They were
Ah,
talking about putting
VSTs,
that in when they took over
yeah.
when MuseCore took over.
But with the flat pack, it's funny though. With the app image, it works just fine, and uh, that is their preferred or officially supported method of installing
It's
Audacity.
also got the telemetry enabled by default.
Oh, and
yep,
that's
because it's compiled by the
Which,
Audacity
for the
team.
record, I don't care about.
I don't either.
I mean, if I'm worried
I
about it, I'll go in there and turn it off. But I do not care.
I
I
don't.
also use Audacity on Windows, but I don't really.
Windows, how dare you?
Yeah, well, I do have Windows, and I kind of
He's probably on
used to
Windows right
have.
now.
Well, I'm on Fedora, of course.
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah,
all right, all right.
but when I'm on Windows, I used to have this mindset, even when I after I switched to Linux, that open source software is neat. But when I'm using Windows or Android, which is already which already has closed source stuff in it, then it was like I might as well just continue using the usual software I used to use. For example, I still haven't gone around setting up Firefox on Windows. I still have Chrome, even though
Oh,
that on all of my other devices I use Firefox, even on my phone.
yeah.
But
Well,
then but then I installed Android on my phone and started replacing my phone apps with open source alternatives. And I realized it even if the OS has the proprietary Google Play services, it still feels nice to switch to open source pro software.
yeah, I do the
So
opposite. I bring the proprietary software to Linux. I don't care. It doesn't bother me at all to do that kind of thing. Uh, it's a
I've
platform, man.
always been pragmatic enough to where if I can make the open source stuff work without, I mean, a tremendous amount of effort, then I'll go that route. But
Yeah,
there's just times when the you've got something you need to do, and the only option out there is a proprietary piece of software or tool or whatever. And nobody should ever. I don't know. I don't know how you could get along being full Stallman because you can't get away from proprietary code on most distributions anyway, just because of the firmware. The Linux firmware package has a lot of proprietary blobs in it, so
and
it's
also your
well,
CPU microcode.
well,
yeah
they
the
have the Libra
microcode.
kernel though. There is a kernel that comes out with all that stuff stripped out. So
Yeah,
long as your hardware is supported by that kernel, then you can at least get the boot going without touching anything proprietary.
but if you want the microcode so that you can take advantage of the hardware that you paid for,
And also
unfortunately,
the CPU level vulnerability
You don't
mitigations.
need none of that. That slows you down anyway. You just no, just go ahead and turn those off in the kernel anyway,
yeah,
so you get your 15% speed back.
yeah, I actually agree with that.
I used
It
to do it, and then just kind of did some A/B testing, and by that I mean I rebooted a couple times, and after I made the change, and it didn't really feel any different, so I just stopped, just simply because I didn't notice. So maybe
yeah.
it shaved off 60 seconds on that Caden live render, but I didn't notice it because I walk away. I mean, the render's going to be an hour, so
Hmm.
I'll be back.
This sort of ties back to the original conversation that hardware is so good that software not being as efficient as it could be starts to matter less and less. I'm not sure if you know the YouTube channel Technology Connections. The guy reviews and talks about all technology.
Mm.
And in a video, he mentioned that he switched to a laptop from a desktop PC for video editing so that he can have a more efficient setup. And to quote him, render time is not work time. If he can just do the editing just as
Yeah.
efficiently as he would on a desktop, but rendering takes longer, he doesn't have to be at the computer to render. And he also said that he doesn't want to switch to Linux because he wants to work on his computer, not work on his computer.
Yeah. Well, that's a huge reason why I use Linux Mint, man. I install it and then I do work. I do not touch as far as I maybe change the color. I go to dark mode, but all of the configuration that I add onto Linux Mint probably takes about a whole 6 minutes after the first install. Pretty much never gets touched ever again because I spend my time in Audacity or Kden Live or browsing the web or doing stuff that has nothing to do with a configuration file anywhere.
So that's an interesting
Yeah,
question. I imagine our listeners would probably be curious to know, Leo, is that all you're running is Mint?
So I keep waiting for Elementary OS to come out. Their new EOS 7, I think, is what it's going to be. That's going to be really where it decides what I decide moving forward.
Oh, that's
I
interesting.
likely stay with Mint because it's familiar, but I mean, underneath the hood, Elementary is the same, and they come with Flatpak out of the box. So, it depends on the workflow. And I think Albert, which is how I launch all my stuff lately, um, it works just fine in both, and probably feels a little more right opinion style, right? In Elementary because it behaves like Mac.
I've been donating
yeah,
money to Elementary for, I don't know, maybe going on 5 years now. That being
They're
said,
good.
I don't have a single machine running it.
Oh
I'm
man,
I enjoy looking at it from time to time because that is one distribution where you can have uh, a good expectation that everything is going to be cohesive and works really well.
oh yeah, oh
And
yeah, yeah.
Elementary has contributed a lot to the overall GTK and Linux ecosystem.
oh,
So
that's a labor of love
anything,
over there.
so any amount of money you give them will eventually benefit Linux as a whole.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Yeah, I have jumped around quite a bit, but at this point, basically all my machines are running Fedora. I had to try Fedora in order to start liking Flatpaks because even on my do it myself Fedora is installed with Sway, I'm still in my tinkering phase. But even though it's not just install it and it works, I installed it and then I installed Sway and a couple of things. And on Fedora, Sway even pulls Flatpak and Piper as a dependency. So it's the best choice, I think, if you want to tinker, but you also want everything that you would expect to work.
yeah.
So a while back, I was trying out. I kept going back to Arch, but since I've decided to go full on Fedora, I've just been really very content with it.
I still have two machines running Arch. I've got this machine running Mint 21.1. Um, both of these are running Ubuntu server
Mm.
because that's the that's in my opinion the best choice just because.
Hold on, you're not angry that when you apt update and apt upgrade, it gives you like 4 lines of news?
Oh wow. I like how that's people
It's the
always.
newest controversy.
Oh
Everybody's
my
talking about it.
gosh, people get over yourself. Oh yeah, it's like ads. It's being interpreted as ads. It's not ads. It's just um, information. And by the way, Ubuntu server has had like something on there about Kubernetes and
Yeah.
microcates and that for the longest time. Nobody said a word.
Yep.
It just they throw a little something in there extra, and gee whiz, come on, folks. But people will be what they are, I suppose. Just put NeoFetch in your Bash RC or something like that, and
That's
Mhm.
true. Yeah. Oh, yeah. It takes a few keystrokes to turn it off, and I think um, that's the easier way to do it.
yeah,
Hmm.
yep,
More,
it is.
considerably more keystrokes to go complain about it on Twitter, though.
I mean, I like having it because within that information is, you know, if I've got updates to install or because I've been known to SSH into these things when I'm on the road, and if it's got important updates, I can go ahead and run them from there, and
You're a
it's
braver man
useful.
than I. I wait till I get home.
Well, if it's something that like if I feel like the last update might have gimped something a little bit, I might pay attention for the next one to come out. If I'm waiting on a specific problem to be fixed, then.
Right.
Um, but I always use Tmux. Yeah, pro tip: if you're gonna shoot, I'm 3 feet away from it, and if I SSH from this thing, I'll run it in TMUX because God knows what'll happen, you know. Um, but yeah, that's what I got on these. This is a Pi 400, and it's running mintcast.org right now, and
Mm.
it's doing it fabulously. Um, Off camera is a Rock Pro 64. That's what's running our website because
Ah.
I was using it as a NAS for the longest time. The problem with some of these uh, SBCs that are from companies like Pine 64, that you know the software ecosystem just isn't quite there as well as it is
Yeah.
on the Pies. But then there's a Pi 4 down here that's running my Three Fat Truckers website, and that's running fabulous. And then I got two zeros. One's one of those two uh, zero two Ws, and the other
Oh,
one's
you got the
just a
two.
plain.
Nice.
Yeah, uh, that it's light years ahead of the old Pi Zero. Now I've
Yep.
actually got a full fleshed out website running on that Pi Zero with 512 megs of RAM and
Hmm.
single core, and it's not the fastest thing in the world, but it works. And I just threw like a little blog site up there just to see how well it would perform as a web server. So far,
Right.
it's fine, you know. Two laptops. One I take on the road's got Arch XFCE, and I took advantage. One thing that's in the new installer for Arch, you can almost get by with far less know-how with Arch than you ever could in the past, because that Arch install script
Well,
is actually
installing it you can,
uh,
but
well. Uh,
the moment you run into a problem, you got to go running to the forum, unless you got the know-how.
it's. I think the problems, it might have been overstated, but it does happen from time to time. The last thing I remember was what, about 8 months ago they pushed some update for Grub, and it
Oh
broke
yeah, yeah,
everybody's boot partition, whatever. And then after the fact, they said, "Oh yeah, here's what you do to fix that."
yeah,
So it
yeah.
does
Endeavor OS
happen.
came out pretty quickly with a fix for the community. I think anybody could use it because Endeavor OS is really just Arch with a
As
few
far as
feature
I'm
tweaks.
aware, it was due to Arch shipping a Git release of Grub,
Yeah,
which is an interesting choice. But it's also very Arch choice.
Yeah, I was gonna say right, like it's a thing that happens in Arch. That's the risk you take
yeah. You
when
have
you
to be.
run something like that.
You got to be willing to take those risks, and you got to be. But you know, in my case, it was. I enjoyed the process of learning these things and having that full control. Another thing is, and I know there's ways of achieving this with other distributions, but on machines that I've got on the road, they really, I need them to not be doing anything online that I don't explicitly tell it to do.
Yeah,
You know, I can't have it going and updating the repos and all that in the background, you know, when I'm tethering it to my phone or whatever. And Arch is the only way I've been absolutely sure that I knew how to stop it from doing that. So, and then the other laptop I keep here at home, that's got Arch Plasma on it, and I think I'm getting ready to switch that to something else because I'm just not happy with the way it's got one of those Optimus Nvidia Intel things going on in it, and I don't know, the support for that's kind of dodgy. You really
yeah.
in
I
order
think
to
I've heard
run.
some. I think I've heard some good things about Optimus and Pop! OS.
Yeah, I'm running the Optimus Manager right now, but it basically means that you can't use Wayland, and I'm not 100% sure I'm excited about using that, but I mean it's a limitation that they don't seem to be interested in working beyond. So I'm thinking about trying something. I was going to try Ubuntu Unity because that seems to be, to this day, the best 4K. See, that's the other thing. It's got one of those 4K 15-inch monitors because that makes sense. Um, and so you either have to set it for 4K and then use the fractional scaling at like 200% to make it look normal, but then some elements don't respond to the um, fractional scaling, and some applications don't respond. Like Audacity doesn't respond to it at all because as of right now, it's based on WX widgets, and I just don't. I don't know if I'm doing something wrong or
I'm not
whatever.
sure how much of that depends on the desktop environment. I have a device with a high DPI screen where I just use Fedora with GNOME and on 200%. And most things, basically everything looks fine. A couple of apps don't. They can't be upscaled properly. But I think that's because they are X-Valent,
Hmm.
which
Yeah,
is another thing. I really love me some Wayland, but I also haven't had a device with hybrid graphics since I switched to Linux.
yeah. The pixel doubling, the 200% isn't a fraction, so it's not
Yeah,
fractional scaling.
Well, yeah,
It's just scaling up. But Xwayland should, whatever app is run through Xwayland should, as long as you do not have fractional scaling turned on in GNOME, respect the 200 and not end up blurry.
yeah,
But
it
when you
does.
turn on the fractional
Yeah,
scaling, the ability to do it, not even choose a fraction, the ability to choose a fraction will, after the first reboot, will make everything blurry at
yeah,
200%.
I experienced that. Even if I set it back to 200%, they were blurry. I had to turn off fractional scaling support to get them to be not blurry
Right.
again.
Yeah. I think you and I were having the conversation about it. And that's when I figured it out a few months ago. And yeah, it's
Oh,
kind of annoying. But
I've heard I've also heard good things about Elementary OS having a very smart way of scaling.
yes,
yeah.
they probably do the best non-scaling scaling that you can do because they don't actually scale. They just pump up like the
The
actual
font
pixel
size,
density of everything. So like when you go in and like up the font scaling, everything else respects that as well. Like in GNOME, if you were to do 100% scaling and then pump up the fonts or something like that, everything looks too small. In Elementary, however, when you pump up that font scaling, the title bars grow with the font in the right proportion, as opposed to just
hmm,
saying, "All right, text is bigger, have fun."
I just remembered one more thing that I came across on the tablet. I have 200%. I just that I run GNOME with 20% on it. Is that when I'm opening images in the GNOME image
Oh
viewer,
yeah.
they will also be twice as big. It will, let's say it's a 512 by 512 image. And if I have 20% scaling on, it will show up as a 1024 by 1024 image, but it will still say it's at 100% scale. So if I want to view the image at its real scale, I have to
50%.
zoom it. I have to go to 50%. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
assume
and but
that's not a
but
thing on
the
elementary because of how they do things.
I think so. I think you're correct on that. But what's funny about that is that not even Windows and Mac really do that either. So, I
Yeah,
mean, Elementary's winning.
4K is a bit of a gimmick even to this day. With but that laptop just happens to be 4K. I do have a 1080p screen. I think I told everybody the story of me getting that
Maybe at
blue
the 15
smoke.
inches, but I'll tell you, at 24 inches or shoot, even 16, 17 inches, anything nearing 4K or something that you have to pixel double to get it to look the right proportion and size,
Mm.
it's not a gimmick. That is some
Well,
smooth
okay.
imaging, man.
Let's say that it's a gimmick on laptops then. Uh,
Yeah, I guess you could say. Oh, I'm just saying because I've got a 16-inch MacBook Pro for work, and going to a 1080p screen at the same size, nope. You can tell. I mean,
I
by a
can see
lot.
that's probably that makes sense because I had a 17-inch Toshiba that I sent off to Joe and he never got it. Um,
Oh,
I told the story on Mintcast. I sent him this 17-inch Toshiba because I just wasn't using it anymore. It had a 1080p screen and it was fine, but yeah, it seems like maybe 2K would have been a little bit better. Uh, but I sent
and
him that and it got mixed up in transit with somebody's Amazon return. So what
oh,
Joe received on the other end was a real nice um, USB connectable turntable record player.
That's
that
cool.
yeah, it's got oh, it is. It's a nice one too. It's over $200. It's got the speakers and then the USB to where you can presumably just hook it up to a PC and then use something
Well,
like VLC to capture it or
as
whatever.
long as you can run Linux on it, then all's fair, right?
Right.
Maybe it already does run Linux.
I don't
I
think
don't know if
so.
he's sold it yet or not. He said so. So presumably that laptop I sent him is leaning up against a wall in a Amazon return center somewhere.
Probably.
And
Someone when they order that turntable is going to get a really nice laptop.
yeah, yep. So well, anyway, you guys have any predictions for the new year or
Linux will continue to exist.
all right,
Linux is too big to fail. You could say,
too big to fail.
It's too
because
open
the
source to
entire
fail.
the entire world is running Linux at this point.
Yeah. Well, actually, you could make that argument, right? Because there's so many companies that rely on Linux
Yeah.
that they wouldn't allow it to fail. They might try and take it over or something like that, right? Like if everybody abandoned it, right? These companies would figure out a way to keep it going in
Or
zombie
maybe they
mode
would try
forever.
forking it before they try to take it over.
Right,
What
right, right, right.
forking Linux?
Yeah, maybe Amazon, Microsoft, and Google will end up with their own forks of Linux if the main Linux project would ever happen to go away.
Yeah, I suppose because they did it with OpenSSL back in the day, right? Like nobody
Yeah.
cared about actually updating it or anything like that. Everybody used OpenSSL, and then when you ended up was it Heartbleed maybe,
Mm-hmm.
and it basically broke encryption on all the websites everywhere because everybody used a specific version of OpenSSL by and large. Uh, then then everybody put their money where their mouth was, but hmm, and even then, and even now, I think they could probably use some additional love.
Yeah, I wish they would too, because I've got a bunch of machines over here using it
Yeah.
because everything I've got sitting behind a reverse proxy, and in order to do all the resolving behind the proxy, you've got to have self-signed certificates. So I suppose,
Well,
well, I've got Cloudflare up in front of all that stuff too, so maybe I'm sorted. I don't know.
Yeah.
That remains to be seen. Um,
well, one prediction that I'm going to make is that I am probably going to step up my networking game because listening to all of your hosting and Leo's setup that he talks about on LAS, that I really do have to take up to step up my networking game because the most advanced thing I have is my old laptop running as a home server that I only SSH into from within the house, so I don't really host anything. Maybe I should try to get one of those mini PCs or a Raspberry Pi and do something with that.
If you're hosting for yourself, make it easy on yourself and just use Tailscale.
I was just
But if you're
going to
Yeah.
say,
hosting for the
there's
web, then I mean, yeah, poke a
Tailscale is
hole.
one easy way to solve the how do I connect to it from outside my network problem,
Yeah.
because when you're at home, your IP address is dynamic. There's other options. You could use a dynamic DNS and get yourself. The cool thing about that is you can get yourself a free domain through like duck.
You mean a static DNS?
Well, it's dynamic. It's called dynamic DNS, and what it does is it kind of works with cron to go and curl a little something and
Yep.
execute a little something to update your DNS on the internet. That way you can point and you set up the domain name on their site, and then point your server towards that, and the server will run a little script every 5 minutes or so to make sure that the IP address hasn't changed, and if it did, it dynamically updates with
Uh,
the records on online.
Yeah, my
okay,
favorite
makes
was
sense.
afraid.org, and they had like a laundry list of second level domains that you could choose from.
Yeah,
So like if you found on that website you found fruit.org or something, you could have norbert.fruit.org, and then that would be your home on the internet, but free, right? So
right.
yeah,
Or you could
And
add as many A records as you want, just to, like, if you wanted to run a Jellyfin server and maybe a web server, I don't know, a Nextcloud, obviously you could put like Norbert Nextcloud dot, I don't know, duckdns.net or something like that. So you don't have to have a static IP. I've got a static IP here just to simplify things, but it's not necessarily the only option. And like Leo said, Tailscale. I've never used it. I can't really comment on how easy it is, but everybody that has used it seems to love it. It seems to solve all the problems because even if you use dynamic DNS, you'll still have to poke a hole in your NAT for ports 443 and 80. That way, it'll resolve back to whatever server you're wanting to connect to.
Hmm. Yeah, it's like Hamachi back in the day. I used to use that for playing
Yeah, good
local
times.
area network games with friends that were over
Well,
the internet.
debatable good times.
Well, yeah, I mean, I had a lot of good times because Command and
Minecraft
Conquer
servers.
was ran better over a LAN game than it did directly connecting to each other over dial-up. So, yeah, weird.
Good old dial up.
I know, right?
I
And
burned
when
up
I
a.
got cable, it was great. Everything kind of evened out. But I think that's back to Norbert's point, right? We got to the point where it didn't matter how slow or fast anything was. We had the big, huge pipe to not care. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, there's a video on YouTube called Software. I think it's called Software in Decline. That I'm not sure how who the speaker is, but he talks about how software improving gets less and less important with hardware improving, which
Well, it's
yeah, which I mentioned when I was talking about AI and things like that.
Yeah, I think it's all going to be a moot point anyway here pretty soon. Chat GPT is going to be writing the rest of our software from here on out because not
Troll, troll,
only
troll.
can it speak English, it can speak C++. So you just tell it exactly what you want to, and all you got to do is take the code that Chat GPT gives you and then polish that turd into full-fledged software. So you just take it the last 5% of the way, but Chat GPT kind of does the heavy lifting for you.
So how do we feel about that on the whole?
I feel sorry for programmers. Not really. I think it's just going to make their jobs easier.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it'll likely be a net good. But just like AI art, you're gonna have a lot of people in that field not liking it for a good long time until you realize you can't put the genie back in the bottle, and
No.
then you just learn how to live with it.
It's the same thing as when agriculture was transitioning from manual labor to automated and machinery and stuff like that.
It's an
It's
obvious next step in the evolution of these things. I think is, I mean, having a tool. There's nothing new about having a tool that makes a little lighter weight of the heavy lifting
Yeah.
that needs to be done, and then the human can work harder on the things that humans are good at. Let the machines do the things that machines are good at, and the humans do the things that humans are good at.
Yeah.
And we could probably come up with even more ideas for
Well,
better software.
here's why I think it's going to be a net good. I mean, what is the one complaint about Linux in general is there's not enough software there, or the software that I want isn't on Linux.
the other
So
big thing is
Chat
hardware support
G
not being pre-installed on a lot of devices.
Well, sure. Okay, right. But I mean, when you get there, when you're on Linux, you've passed the hardware hurdle. That's it, right? Like this thing that I like is not there. So now it is exponentially easier as far as ChatGPT is concerned to get that software there because as long as you've got a knack for the programming, um,
And
80%,
kind of
90% is done for you already. You just
it
ask it.
negates that barrier that some proprietary software companies have, where it's not worth their uh, investment in terms of time and manpower to support platforms like Linux because the number of users would be presumably lower than that, which would make it cost effective. Well, if you've got AI doing all that work, it makes it adds no takes no resources away from the company, and that maybe that'll mean more proprietary software on the Linux side.
I don't
That
think it'll mean proprietary software because what we've learned, at least in the U.S., is there have been a couple of judges who have um, ruled against copyright on like AI art. So I would suppose that would extend to software as well. So you can't copyright it because you didn't write it. The case that was brought up was the case of the monkey that took a photographer's camera and then took a selfie,
I
and
was
then
just about to talk
yeah,
about that.
and then the person that owned the camera tried to claim ownership, copyright over that particular photo, couldn't do it because the monkey took the photo, and it was, I mean, as far as everything is concerned, an inanimate object or whatever, so you couldn't copyright it. Now it's just public domain. So you can create a whole lot of good open source software with ChatGPT, but you're not going to be able to do proprietary stuff because you can't copyright it.
Oh, that's interesting. I hadn't considered that. Yeah. So
It's going
even
to
if you're
be it.
just porting over proprietary software on Windows to Linux, because of the well, partly because of the technology it's using to do that work, um, it, I guess what you're saying is it wouldn't be legal to make that proprietary
Yeah, I think so. I think Stallman won.
then.
Everything
that
has to be. If you're going to start out that 80%, I guess what you can do is copyright the last mile of whatever code you do to refine that. That is something you can likely copyright, or put some kind of license, proprietary license on. But outside of that, I don't know, man. That base code's going to be out there.
hmm.
Well, in terms of image generation, if you train an AI on an image set of which you all own the copyrights for, then I think you can copyright whatever the AI generates. Because if you only used things that you own to uh, to train it, then I don't see any reason why it shouldn't be
What
possible to.
Well, you didn't make it though. That I think is the point about all of this though, is that the monkey made the photo, which is why it can't be
Yes,
copywritten.
yes,
The
but the
AI
photograph.
made the photo, which is why you can't copyright it.
what if the
Yes,
the only
but
thing the
if you
AI
made the
does?
yes, but
Yeah.
if you made the AI, the photographer
Oh,
didn't make the monkey.
so wait. So we created the monkey that in turn took a photo of himself. Is that what you're saying? So we invented the monkey.
Well, no, but if let's say a company like Amazon, who I assume sell a lot of stock images, created their own AI, and they just fed all of their stock images into it that they already own, and it created new images. So they own the AI and they own all the images that they use to train it. Then I don't see a reason not to let them own the outcome, the generated image.
It's gonna be sticky.
If
Is
everything happens in house within Amazon, then what comes of it out of it?
What if the only thing that the AI does is snap up a package, a
How do you mean?
proprietary piece of software, or just turns it into a flat pack to where you
Ah,
still got the proprietary bits in?
Well, it didn't write any code. It,
No.
it it just wrote the manifest to stick it into Snapcraft or into FlatHub or something like that. I
Right.
don't. That doesn't change the license even when a human does it.
Yeah.
So I
So that
suppose it'd be fine.
yeah, there's there you
yeah.
go, Adobe.
Well, right, because
Since
humans
we're on the
already do that particular process, right? And yeah, nothing really changes. They automate that process. It's now just
Hmm.
GitHub actions that spit out a thing and then give it straight to wherever it needs to go.
Right on.
since we're on the topic of AI, does anyone have any predictions regarding AI
I think we're
for
going to
this
see a
year?
whole lot of crappy software come out in
People
the
are
next
gonna
year.
take Chat GPT and make all kinds of silly crap out of it.
hmm And
Um,
because it can already write GUI programs.
yeah.
So, yeah, we're going to find a bunch of programs that do something useful, likely, because it's going to solve somebody's problem. But I think overall, like, accessibility might not be there. Usability might not even fully be there.
Privacy, forget about
Um,
it.
yeah, like, and then, like, looking at the software, like, text will flow off of buttons and things like that. It's not very good at that yet. So,
So you're saying I can tell ChatGTP to take this code and rewrite it to use a more recent version of Electron that can actually properly run on Wayland.
If you had the
well,
source
I
code, you could.
suppose the Discord code's not open, so I don't know
Yeah.
that
Right.
ChatGPT would have. But maybe you could do that with Video Ninja, or something else that is open, possibly. I don't know. But simple GUI programs, and I think emphasis on the simple, are possible. with ChatGPT today. So we'll
Maybe in
see
the
how this
future
goes.
you will maybe in the future you will be able to take an audio only recording and AI generate a video feed for it.
Oh, you can do that already. As long as you've got 5-10 seconds of somebody doing kind of this or whatever. Um, yeah, because we can already make deep fakes, and that's
Yeah.
all that is just moving the lips to the words, and
Yeah,
it
but a
won't be
deep
perfect, but it'll be there.
yeah, but in a deep fake you take all the facial expressions and them into the new face. But if you just have the audio, then the AI would have to guess what facial expression to use based on the tone of the voice and things like that.
Right, and that's what I'm saying. It's not going to be perfect, but I mean, we can already AI generate people,
Mm.
so
We could
I
make
don't
this
think I
show
don't
into
think
an
we're that far.
anime.
What's that?
We could make this show into an anime where
Oh
we're
yeah,
all
well that's totally already there, right? You got to do a lot of the rigging yourself, but there is an open source VTuber thingy that you
oh
can
wow.
stick an anime person in, and then map it to your facial features and call it good. And now we're just now we're all ooh woo together.
Cool. Well, yeah, so AI, that's going to be the thing to watch. Uh,
Actually,
and
I
you,
think I have a Linux prediction. Leo, do you happen to know whether Ubuntu 2304 defaults to Wayland on NVIDIA with the NVIDIA driver?
I think
Ooh, with the NVIDIA driver, I would guess not. But now would be the
Mm,
time to test it. So
yeah, because Fedora did that last year,
yeah,
sometime in one of the releases last year, and NVIDIA asked Canonical to revert the change last minute, so Ubuntu wouldn't default to Wayland on NVIDIA.
yeah. The
I
interim
suspect,
04 is when all of the crazy stuff happens. So if they're gonna swap it to Wayland, it would be that one.
well,
and
if it doesn't happen in 2304, I have a strong feeling it will finally happen in 2310. So I
Mm,
guess that's my prediction.
yeah.
I really wanted to have a Wayland prediction because I am really a fan of Wayland and where it's going. Well, I may be
I have
biased
a
because
you
prediction.
mean X12?
yeah, X12.
I
I may be biased because when I moved to Linux, because on Intel graphics, I just used Wayland from day one without knowing what it was.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, I have a prediction about me. I won't be moving to Wayland full time in 2023 because both
Oh,
Mint and Elementary use X.
I suppose for the most part, I will move over to it when Clem decides it's a good idea.
Yeah, pretty much. And then when Danielle tries it, then yeah, then
Yeah.
yeah, likely it'll be one of those two, Clem or Danielle, one of them. When you
I
do it,
think I've read some statements or posts something about from the elementary team. I may be wrong
well, I know they're working on it. Yeah,
about them really wanting to move to Wayland eventually.
sure.
But as far as I know, we haven't really heard anything from the Mint side about Wayland.
Well, no, we have, and it's that Clem doesn't deem it a priority, so it's on the
Okay.
back burner. It's there. There are um, requests and that have had some traction, but X is not going anywhere. So and Mint is a very conservative distro, so not in 2023.
And I wonder if it's fleshed out good enough anyway. Because when
Oh, it's
well,
not. It's not. They
uh,
haven't done the work.
I don't think I'm not sure if OBS works really well
It
on
works okay.
yeah,
There,
and that
there
would be
are
a
there are still some
deal
paper
breaker.
cuts with OBS, but OBS definitely works better on X. I think, at
Right.
least for me,
Now's
in my experience.
now's the time to place your bets. Will XFCE or Cinnamon get Wayland support? Full
Ooh,
Wayland
cinnamon,
support first.
cinnamon,
Well,
cinnamon.
because they the XFC team have already started working on it,
Yeah,
Well,
there's been
and
some chatter about
they also
XFCE.
gradually ported their XFC apps to Wayland.
does does not it? I mean, I don't know the answer to this question. I'm just musing, but does not the X in XFCE mean X?
So it'd have to
No,
be W.
no,
What does
no.
X stand
It
for then?
well, not well. XFC used to be a
X face. X, a face for X. Oh, look,
It,
now we're all googling it now. Uh,
because I know it for like 10 minutes and then I forget. Uh,
Xforms. Xforms is an XML format. Is that what I'm
Mm-mm.
looking for? Xforms common environment, it means. But it no longer stands for anything. That's why it's no longer all caps. XFC is not all caps.
No, it's
Interesting.
not. GNOME is, but XFC is not.
Yeah, but GNOME also doesn't stand for anything anymore. I think it's they just
Right, right. It
retroactively
used to be like the GNU network object model something or another. I don't remember what it was. What is it?
environment.
Environment.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, yeah, there you go. Yeah.
I'm still a fan of XFCE, and
Ooh, I am not. Just because like it just breaks half the time. I close my lid, it doesn't feel like doesn't feel like sleeping right now. And then when I open the lid, it doesn't feel like waking up. And I try to connect another monitor to it, and it's like, I'm just not going to display on that thing, or I'm not going to give you the resolution that that is possible on your monitor. When then I swap over to any other desktop environment and have all of that stuff work.
yeah, I
I
So
I
suppose
couldn't.
I can't argue that because the one machine I'm running it on with Arch, I never close the lid and tell it to sleep. It's either running or it's not,
well, if
and
I
that's a
explicitly tell it to sleep, it will do that. But whether it wakes up or not is kind of hit or miss.
mm,
I haven't tried XFC on my laptop, but I was running it on my desktop for a year because of NVIDIA, and I recently made the jump to GNOME Wayland. If XFC gets full Wayland support, I will probably try it again. But
Hmm.
I I eventually left XFC because uh, because I wanted to move to Wayland.
Yeah, yeah,
But
that's reasonable.
I will forever XFC will forever have a special place in my heart
Mm.
because I was on my laptop using Linux and then I installed it on my desktop and I had some issues and I thought maybe changing desktop environments would solve it. That's when I went from GNOME to XFC and I just we just got each other with XFC.
Mm.
The window placement, the window management is a lot closer to what I want on SSE than on GNOME. But then I found the GNOME extension, which is not auto tiling, not like PopShell, but it extends GNOME's built-in window placement, window tiling abilities. So you can
Sweet.
tile windows, you can drag them to the corner of the screen. You can have them in a grid, like not just the 2 by 2, but maybe a 3 by 2, and if you resize the window sides, they will move together. It's kind of neat.
That's cool. So here's another prediction. Vanilla OS will steal a whole lot of Ubuntu users, um, and maybe even Fedora users, Alpine users, and Arch users as well.
now
They're
refresh my
80. They're
memory. That's just a no snaps, no
No,
extra
it's
stuff on
an
top of
immutable.
GNOME.
It's an immutable. It's its own implementation. It's its own. It's not an implementation really. It's its own take on immutability. It's an
yeah.
on-demand immutable distro because you can turn the immutability on and off.
Oh,
Hmm.
You can.
And
You can.
and
I,
here's my
I guess
favorite
it's.
feature is APX. So if you're not familiar, APX is basically a way to build containers on the fly using Podman. And by the way, you don't do any of this. You just go APX install dash dash like DNF and then the package you want to install. And then this Ubuntu based atomic distro will reach out to the Fedora repositories, pull the software down, install it in the container, and then give it to you in a menu. So
Oh, so it's like
you,
this. It's like DistroBox then.
yeah, maybe I don't. I'm not familiar with DistroBox, but
Well,
you
DistroBox
do
is.
nothing. So if any step in DistroBox requires you to create a box yourself, no, because APX does it all for you. You need just an additional dash dash AUR or DNF or APK or APT, I think, for Ubuntu. But you're
Does
able
it
to
do
freely
XBPS?
install. What's that?
XBPS for void?
No, no, because you have the ability to use Arch, and I think Arch tends to have a little bit more software available.
yeah.
But I mean, I don't think that it would be a huge, insurmountable challenge to add XBPS to it, because that all it's doing is pulling down the software and building a container to run it in. But seamlessly, though, that's the thing. It's seamless. You install it with the same difficulty that you install software in Ubuntu on the command line. That's it. Apt install whatever. Instead of apt, it's APX, and you add a dash dash wherever you want the software to come from. And that's
Yeah.
it. And it'll run it.
Since it's since it's based on Ubuntu, and Ubuntu is also transitioning to Pipewire, so I assume is Vanilla OS does it have a stable release yet?
I'm looking at the
It's based
website
on
right now.
23 oh whatever Kinetic. It's based on Kinetic, whatever that one is.
I think I think it that already has Pipewire. So I assume if it when it becomes stable, when Vanilla OS becomes stable, it will have Pipewire. So it really does sound appealing to me as well. But I'm not really big on Debian based distros. I have Debian on my laptop because I wanted to have something that's static and doesn't get feature updates.
Well, the
But
cool thing about
I
this is that the updates are atomic and you can roll them back.
yeah
So if something goes wrong, there's a built-in way to fix that.
yeah, it kind of make reminds me of NixOS more than any other immutable distro
You can kind of compare
because
it to
of
that.
the on-demand immutability aspect.
I do wonder how, if you install the same package from two different repos, how that's handled in the menu. Not, I mean, in the container, obviously they're separate, but in the menu, will it just be two exactly identical icons sitting next to each other?
Well, the way DistroBox does it is it has the app name and then in brackets the container name.
Oh,
So
that
if
might be
I
how they handle
yeah,
it. Yeah,
so if
yeah.
I am on if I'm on Fedora and I have a container named Bullseye for Debian Bullseye, and if I install, for example, Tuner, it will be Tuner brackets Bullseye or Debian or whatever I name the
You know, I
container.
Got it.
noticed Cinnamon does that because I had
Yep, with the
Audacity.
Flatpak. Yeah.
Yeah, because I had it installed it from the repo, and then when I installed it from the Flatpak, it put the bracketed Flatpak
Mm-hmm.
word in the menu. And then what's cool though is that once I got rid of the repo version of Audacity, they took away the
Yep. Only when it
Flatpak.
needs to be. Yeah.
Yeah,
That
The
is
but
a
so
very nice detail.
Yeah.
yeah,
So the one thing
this
about Vanilla OS, this is why it's a prediction and not a today. It's happening.
yeah.
APX isn't ready. Um, I installed. I tried to install something from each of the repositories, and everyone failed. But APX also allows you the ability to do what they call side loading, which is just installing a deb. And doing that also failed. Dependencies were not there in the base system. So I suppose side loading doesn't actually put anything in a container. Um, so yeah, I was never able actually to install software on APX using APX. So when they iron it out, I think it's an absolutely fantastic idea. And yeah, that might be the only thing that could take me away from Mint or Elementary, is
So
APX actually working.
is this like NixOS in that it's declarative when you
No,
set it up the first time, or is it
no,
just yeah,
it
okay?
works the way you expect. It works like Ubuntu does, as far as configuring things up.
Okay.
You know what
Might
would be really cool? I assume that Vanilla OS will also have various spins with different desktop environments eventually.
Yeah, maybe.
So
Um,
what would be cool is having Vanilla OS with Pantheon.
I think what will
I
happen instead is APX will just make it into the different distros, and then you won't need to have spins of vanilla. You just add it where you want it, just like you can do Nix, right? Like you can add
yeah
Nix to anything, and then take advantage of Nix and its repositories. I
yes,
think that's what's going to happen with APX.
and if you add Nix to a different distro, it doesn't manage your system; it just manages your applications that you want to
Exactly,
install.
just like
So
APX would. Yes.
so then can you add? Will you be able to add APX to a non-immutable distro and just install and use it as a container manager?
I cannot answer that question because I am not Mirko Brombin, but I would suppose, yeah. I mean, I don't see if APX is portable. It's just bringing over Podman with it, and then creating containers as you install software. There's really not
Mm,
much to manage at that point. So
yeah, I've
I
been using
suppose,
the DistroBox. I've been using DistroBox for this purpose because I'm on Fedora, and there's a lot of biology related tools in the Debian repos that I wanted to have access to. So I
Ooh.
just spin up a Debian container, a Debian distro box.
Hmm.
What's interesting about the Debian and Ubuntu repos is that there's a lot of packages, but a huge chunk of those packages is the highly specialized tools for research and stuff,
Yeah.
which I really like. The fact that there is a curated repository when you can go to get all that stuff and not have to hunt down all the debs and RPMs from the developers'
Yeah.
repos and websites.
Yeah. That is nice, and that is one thing that APX will let you do on any distro, I suppose, if it ever gets ported. Would be nice.
I'm starting to warm up to the idea of an immutable system because it's taking me some time because I really like tinkering with the system. And the reason got interested in NixOS is that it is sort of immutable because it's a declarative system. So it lets you tinker with the system, but once it's built, it is as it is, and it's sort of unmovable, unmodifiable.
Mhm. So does that mean like so like in Nobara, I think, right, is the Fedora immutable one?
No,
Or
that's
Silverblue,
not
Silver
immutable.
Blue.
maybe?
Silverblue,
Silverblue.
yeah. Nobara
Yeah.
is a fork of Fedora. I mean, it's a Fedora-based system that is maintained by Glorious Eggroll. It has its own repositories. It has
Oh,
its own builds of things like Proton and Steam and
got
bottles
it.
and things like that.
Okay, so
But
Silverblue.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so when you want to make a change to the way that, say, Pulse works, or right, yeah, just take Pulse for instance. Um, it is an immutable system. So does that mean that I cannot go in and
you.
change a configuration file and reboot and it still stay?
As far as I know, it's called layering file system. So the modifications you make, you have the base image of the system that is atomically installed, and then you can
Oh,
layer stuff on top of that, not with DNF, but with I think it's called RPMOS3.
so can okay, so you can then likely back up that layer, and then so you would install Fedora again, or roll back or whatever, and then put that layer on top, and then you would be good.
I would assume so.
Yeah, that's cool. That's pretty cool.
And speaking of Silverblue, uh, Fedora have announced that there will be an official Sway spin for Fedora and a Sway version of Fedora
Oh yeah,
Sway
yeah, yeah. I did see
and
that.
an immutable Fedora. So the Fedora Silverblue family. I'm not sure what to call it because there's Silverblue, there's Kino White. All of them have different names. So there will be an official Fedora spin with Sway as well as an
Swaver
immutable one.
blue.
Sway. Well, no, I
Swaver
think
blue.
they already have a name, which is the name of a tree that kind of looks like the Sway logo if you look at it.
Oh,
But yeah, there will be an immutable one as well. So
cool.
because I'm running Sway, that might get me to try an immutable system because I haven't tried Silverblue Light yet because I just like Sway so much. But if
Yeah,
it will be an option, I may just jump.
pretty cool.
I've not jumped on that bandwagon yet. I'm thinking about trying it. It'd be a good option for my take on the road machine. I don't know. I'm getting ready to do some nuke and paving just for the fun of it. As to when, I don't know. But I made predictions on Mintcast that I'll probably just mirror over here about Ubuntu and ZFS support because the thought is that Ubuntu
Did
is quietly moving away from their ZFS support.
oh, that's not a thought. That's happening.
Well, what's not clear to me, and maybe you would know better, um, does that mean simply that they're not going to have the option to install on a root
ZFS on
pool?
root. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So they're
Just the
still going
operating
to
system.
have they made it clear whether they're going to continue to develop the in tree kernel module?
I don't see any reason why they wouldn't continue doing ZFS that way.
Yeah.
ZFS is important. What I think they're distancing themselves from is installing the OS on ZFS. So ZFS on root, I think, is the only thing that's going to be changing.
Okay.
As far as I could see, that's all. That's all that'll be changing. But ZFS will still be supported in Ubuntu.
Well, that's
It would
good
be cool
because
to it would be cool to see them embrace ButterFS.
yeah,
Erase it?
embrace
Embrace.
it.
Oh,
Yeah,
embrace it. Got it. Oh, okay. I was like, no,
offer
don't
it
do
as
that.
a
I like Btrfs.
well, yeah, because everything, pretty much everything I've got is installed on Btrfs, and it would be nice to have proper installation options for creating the sub, or what do they call it, subdirectories, or the uh, whatever, the sub names, and then the snapshots right there during installation for Btrfs. That way you can do it correctly. Because as it is right now, I don't. I think you can use Btrfs as an installation option, but you don't have the
Subvolumes.
sub volumes.
Subvolumes. Oh, okay,
Right.
I see what you're talking about. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Those don't get created in Ubuntu, nor do they get created in Mint,
Yeah.
which is kind of sad. You can do it manually, but it is a bit of a manual process. So I think for me, um, yeah, it's tough. It's hard to
Wait,
kind of get
so
that
so
done.
does it just install everything on the partition itself, or does
Yeah.
it create a single subvolume and put things there?
It
Because
it does
if
create
you
two subvolumes. It creates at
okay,
and at home.
oh,
So
I mean that's all that Fedora does as well, and
no, Fedora creates a
No,
lot.
Fedora
They create
creates like
no,
four
var.
of
no,
them.
Yes.
No,
Oh yeah, they do.
Fedora by default, Fedora creates, well, I've only checked this in Fedora 34. It
Mm.
created an EFI partition, it created an ext4 boot partition, and then it created the Btrfs partition with only two subvolumes,
You
boot
got to
and
try the new Fedoras because that is different now. They
okay.
have
Yeah, because
So
FFmpeg
it's
and
they do an
var
at
and
so
var
it's
at.
so it's similar
it's
to
smarter.
what OpenSUSE does.
Yeah, and I think Endeavor OS
They
will do
also
that for
have
you
a
too.
dozen subvolumes. Very
Uh-huh.
OpenSUSE, I think it's like a Swiss Army knife. A lot of people know that it's great and useful, but not many people actually have one.
Because for the same reason that people don't do Fedora, it's a slog to get it set up because not everything is available out of the box. I mean, it does not pass the Netflix test whenever you first install it. And then having to go in and, oh, well, how do you fix that? Oh, well, now you got to install RPM Fusion. Well, now you got to do all these other additional repositories. What is Cobra, whatever it is? Uh,
Copper,
Copper. That's
Copper.
the one.
copper,
Copper.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
copper.
So like you have to
With
do all of
I
this
think
stuff
it
to make it
stands
work.
for. I think copper literally stands for cool other package repo.
Probably. That sounds about right for the Linux community. But yeah, I mean the fact that there's an uphill battle after you get through the uphill battle of installing it in the first place is what turns a lot of people off. It doesn't mean that people won't use it because obviously they will, but that some people will not because of that. And I think
It,
OpenSUSE has the same problem, but Gecko fixes that, which is interesting. And I suppose Nobara probably fixes a lot of that
yeah,
too on the Fedora side.
I tried Gecko recently, and it creates if you choose, but I think it does Btrfs
By
by
default.
default. But if you yes, and it sets up various subvolumes. What
Hmm.
I what I would like to see in Gecko is the ability to manually set up subvolumes, because it created subvolumes that I not necessarily want, and it didn't create ones that that I would want. So it's a really nice default, but I would love to see a way in Calamares to customize this subvolume layout,
And
which
that's
you
a
can.
Calamares thing. That's not a Gecko thing.
Yeah, yeah,
So I mean, the request needs to go to a different group.
yeah.
The
That's the
coolest
thing
thing
I
about
really
Gecko
like.
though is that it's not really its own thing. It's that it's just OpenSUSE with configuration. That's it.
Yeah, when you install it, it doesn't even say Gecko; it says OpenSUSE.
Yep, exactly, exactly.
Yeah, but that's one thing that I really like in the Anaconda installer of Fedora, the current one, not the new web-based one. Actually, that's my unpopular opinion that I actually like the current Anaconda installer. I don't. Uh,
Oh, I do too.
maybe
It's fine.
yeah.
It's
It's
not
never
I
linear
bothered
like
me.
though.
yeah. I like
Like
it. Once you get used to it, it's nice, and I like that it has quite few options for. Uh, I mean, there's three different ways to partition. There's the automatic, there's the manual, and there's the advanced one. What I found is that the advanced one is actually a lot more straightforward and easier to use than the second option. A lot of
yeah.
people criticize the simple manual partitioning because it's confusing. The Be Live IT, and I'm not sure how to pronounce that.
It's rigid. It's not that
BLIVT.
confusing. It's frustrating and rigid. The advanced partitioner, but it works.
The
I mean, look, you just have to delete the stuff that you created a couple times to get it in the right order. Otherwise, you got to like tinker with it to get it to move and stuff. It's frustrating,
Yeah,
but I
but
think
if it yeah,
overall the installer, the biggest complaint everybody has about the installer is that it's not linear and
I
that breaks
actually
people's
prefer it.
brains.
I kind of like it not being linear. Maybe it's just
I'm
how
fine
my
with it.
brain
It's
works.
fine. Like you
Yeah.
just click on like we're
You,
configuring disks now, so now we're in the disks thing, and
you're
so
kind of
you're all you're
building
thinking
it,
about is
and then
disks.
you're almost like declaring a system on that kind of installer where you setting these things up, and you might get to a point where you changed your mind about how you did something
Yeah, in linear
earlier
installers, you
on.
have to go back, back,
Yeah,
back, 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 back. In Fedora, it's like, well, which menu item did you mess up? Click it. Now
Mhm.
you're there. So
When you
yeah.
install Fedora Workstation, you just have a couple of options there. But I usually use the net installer, which has a more options. Like it has the user creation in the installer, not in the after word setup screen. And there's also options for pick and choose your software.
Mm.
So I kind of like it being non-linear because it's easier to see how much stuff I have left to do, because everything that is still needs to be setting up is marked with red. So I like the fact that after each setting screen, you go back to the main screen.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's fine. I think it's perfectly fine. But they're changing it, so there was
I
enough of
mean,
an outcry. Or maybe they now think it's trash.
have you either of
Either
you
or.
tried the new Flutter installer for
not
No.
yet.
Ubuntu
Mm-mm.
yet? See,
I
that's
think I
why I
tried
was
it. I think I tried it once when it wasn't quite ready.
see because I was wondering if they were gonna with this new installer if it would be easier for them to add options like ButterFS subvolumes and setting up snapshotting and all that kind of stuff
I
right there
suppose
in the
it's about as
installer.
difficult as adding it to Calamares. I mean, I would hope that they built that software with these different file systems in mind,
Yeah.
but also it's Ubuntu. Same as with CentOS and things like that, right? Like, I mean, the decision's kind of already made for you, and if you go off the beaten path, then well, that's I mean, it's an option, but we're not going to support that. So, uh, if it does make it in, I don't know how much support it's going to have.
And there's
Time will
also
tell.
Bcache FS, which is like ButterFS, but it's not quite like ButterFS. I don't know the technical details. It's also a new file system I've heard a lot of good stuff about.
Cool.
I actually tried installing Debian with ButterFS subvolumes, and in the Debian Entities installer, if you choose ButterFS, it will create one subvolume called @rootfs,
Mm,
and then it will create, I think, etc and etc/fstab on it before you install the system. So if you want to customize your subvolume layout in the Debian installer, you go to different TTY, get a shell, you unmount it, you mount it without a subvolume. You go there, you create your subvolumes, you modify your FS tab, and then you mount them back to slash target.
mm.
And so, but I is there a distro that when you choose ButterFS doesn't create a single subvolume is what I'm wondering about.
I don't know.
Because it's possible to not have any subvolumes.
Hmm.
Well, yeah, Arch. If you just choose, well, if you go Arch the hard way and you just choose ButterFS, then yeah, it just puts it on the
Well,
root.
you don't choose ButterFS, you create a ButterFS subvolume.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's
Thank you for
not
You
that.
choose to
yeah,
use the commands to create
yeah,
ButterFS.
However,
yeah.
the new installer, the Arch install, when you choose ButterFS, it will ask you if you want subvolumes, to which you
Hmm.
say yes because you're not a madman, and it creates all of the same sort of scheme that you would expect from OpenSUSE, and it'll also ask you if you want compression turned on. So
That's
it'll add
nice.
the compression flag to your fstab, fs table,
Yeah.
f.
Stub,
Um,
stub.
so
Yeah,
that's actually kind of cool. That's one reason I immediately took to that new installer, and I haven't looked back because it did ButterFS the right way, which impressed me quite a bit. Um,
the reason I haven't used it yet is that I When Arch install wasn't a thing, I put together a little install script that so if I want to install Arch, I will do the manual partitioning and the packstrap. But once I am in the ch root, I just have a script that will set up everything for me. I think I had to modify it because I use sed to uncomment the local that I want, and the number the line number where each local is, I think, changed at one point as new Arch ISOs came out, so I had to change the single number in
Mm.
there. I
Well,
actually have an Arch install currently as well because I want to keep testing Hyperland, which is a new Wayland compositor, and I tried to install it on Void. I don't want to mess with my Fedora system. I think it's most supported on Fedora and NixOS, but because there's AUR, I can just build it through the AUR, and I've I found it's not stable yet, but I found it the smoothest possible experience to test it through Arch.
I've got a
So
script on my GitHub. If anybody's interested in that, that uh, does all of the updating magic for an Arch Linux install, including using Reflector to update the mirror list, and then updating the repositories, and then it updates your regular packages, and then goes over to the AUR, updates that, and then it cleans the cache, and then it updates your flat packs, and it tells you what it's doing along the way. And I've got that on my GitHub. I it I've received a little bit of flack from the Arch community about that because they're philosophically opposed to anything easy.
Well, yeah, I mean they're philosophically opposed to not making each and every decision,
Yeah.
and automatically updating is opposed to that, right?
Yep. And but I think it's always up to the user to figure out ways to streamline
Oh, sure. That's why
their
EndeavorOS
workflow.
exists, Arco, and all of these others, because those groups do like to automate at least some things.
Yeah.
what if the user decides not to make every decision themselves?
Then they have a really
Chat
crusty
GPT.
old machine that is vulnerable to a lot of things. Likely still works.
Um. Yeah.
Well, I
But
mean, the user doesn't want to make a decision, so it just uses something that's just works, is what I mean.
there's
Oh, right. Yeah,
probably
they chose EndeavorOS. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think
yeah.
they wouldn't choose
That
So,
Arch
that's
at all. That
yeah,
that personality type would
what I mean
never.
is being able to choose not to make choices is also a valid choice.
yeah.
So,
Oh, we're going meta on this. Yeah.
yeah.
So
Yeah,
you
but
don't
that's
want
that's
choice.
why if for some reason you're married to the idea of using Arch, I think someone with a predicament like that would just use one of the Arch derivatives. And if you want it to look crazy, you go Garuda. If you want it to look like nothing, well, Spacey, you go Endeavor OS. If you want to learn something, you go Arco. And I'm sure there are others out there for the extra niche groups. But I mean,
And if you
that's
want
kind
to
of
learn
it.
something and more, and the hard way, you stick with Arch.
Yeah. Well, you
Yeah.
work your way from Arco to Arch. It's the only distro I know of that actively tries to get users to stop using it.
Yeah.
My progression, well, my path of progression to Arch started with Manjaro,
Oh
which
yeah, forget about Manjaro all the time.
yeah,
But yeah,
that's like the
Manjaro, I
mint
think they have
of.
like a kind of a sort of a gaming slant. I don't really know. They tend to be
Well, they're
everything
just
to everybody.
they've got their own design scheme, but it's really just it's Arch, but with a bit more time for the packages to sit and make sure they're gonna
Yeah, I'm not a fan of that. So
install good.
that's why I forget about them all the time. And I ask this question to pretty much everybody that might use Manjaro. Does Firefox have to abide by that 3-day rule of Manjaro holding back packages?
Good question,
I know, I know. I,
because
I don't
that's
use Manjaro, and the folks that do tend to not use Firefox. So I don't know the answer to that question, but I suppose unless you're getting your browser out of the AUR, it does, right? I don't know that there are exceptions to that rule of the 3-day wait period to make sure it doesn't blow stuff up.
I know that Firefox and Chromium have exceptions in Debian where everything is static except those two
Right.
browsers.
Right. Exactly. So does Manjaro follow that that idea of there are some packages that should always be up to date
Yeah.
regardless of where it
It's
how it's been
interesting
done.
because ever since I switched to using the Flatpak of Firefox, I don't really think about the Firefox packages in the native repos of
Hmm.
distros
Yeah.
because
Yeah,
for
because
some,
if I were to use Manjaro and if Firefox had that 3-day rule, it had to abide by that. I'd install it with Flatpak. I wouldn't look back.
Yeah, because you want your browser up to date. That's there's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
So, I think yeah, 15 or so years ago, there used to be this arch derivative called Bridge Linux,
Mm.
and it installed with a kind of an incursus based installer. And I think their flagship desktop was XFCE, but they also had I think they had a GNOME version and a Plasma version. But this was basically about the speed of Endeavor OS, while be it perhaps not quite as well developed. Um, it was basically developed by one guy, and it was you basically had the same outcome once you installed it. You know, it had its own bespoke themes, and this was when we were still in GTK2, by the way. Um, but you ended up with a real Arch uh, uh, based system
Yeah.
when you were done with the installer, and then that project kind of went away, and then I learned throughout the process of using and fixing problems on Bridge, how to manage Arch myself, and then inevitably just ended up installing Arch. But the new installer is really worth giving a try if the installer is the barrier to entry, then it's worth taking a look at. But if you're not willing to fix problems, uh, then I would stick with something else. Anyway, we better get out of here. Um, if you want to get a hold of me, my email is wchauser3@gmail.com. Um, our website, as I said in the beginning, is linuxotc.org, and there'll be links on that page to email the show and various ways to consume the content. Leo, where can we find you at?
You can find me on Twitter. I think at Leo Chavez, and I'm also on the Mastodon. So at Leo Chavez at mastodon.social.
Right on. How about you, Norbert?
I'm also on Mastodon, which I will try to use more actively. I'm at odoben at c.im, so that's ODOBEN. And I wanted to find an instance that has a very short URL, and it's literally just letter C dot im.
Yeah,
Sweet. Well, I guess I'm on there too at wchauser3 at fostodon.org. Is it .org or
I think so.
.com? Fostodon. Yeah, .org. So anyway, we will try to make it back in a fortnight, and that's 2 weeks for Americans. Until that time, I've been Bill.
I've been Leo.
And I've been Norbert.
Thanks a lot, everybody.